My people, my people, my people, my people, my people, welcome. It's another edition, another episode, the part two that I know that you've been waiting for, because you're like, after everything you've heard in the part one of this interview and this conversation and this roundtable, you're like, when can we get to part two like they do on TikTok? Well, guess what? We're back like we never left. That's what we're doing right here. Very excited. Welcome to Don't Forget to Flush, that podcast that is all about the African Renaissance, which I know you heard all about in the part one. Culture commentary, which we're going to get into a bit more of that. And then in this episode, in this particular part, we're really going to get into some toilet seat conversations to have them tell us what they are thinking when they're actually doing the do. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to get into those kinds of deep thinking, deep questions. So welcome back. And of course, I have two individuals that are dear to my heart because they not only speak to the points that we're trying to make, but they are upstanding citizens of this country. And of course, I'm talking about Dr. Law Uradu. And I have to say upstanding so that if somebody's listening, they know they're legit. And of course, Engineer Chris Madu. At this point, people have begun to find out that you guys are actually married to not just sisters, but entrepreneur sisters, folks doing business. So I guess let me jump into it and ask you guys, what's that like, being married to sisters and, and they're entrepreneurs and they're doing their thing and they're both medical professionals? What's that world like? Come on, Claw. You gotta tell, because you said in the last episode, doctor married, want somebody to be cooking.
Yeah, man. Yeah,
what's that like? Being married to an entrepreneur, sisters.
Yeah, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, right? A lot of my behavior comes from my dad and my parents.
Yeah.
My parents are entrepreneurs. They run their clinic. We had a clinic back home in Nigeria, and so I watched my dad, the way he married my mom.
Yeah.
This is a busy woman who ran her clinic. As a matter of fact, when we were young, we lived upstairs and the clinic was downstairs.
Oh wow!
And then when the patients grew and the clinic grew, we moved to a different place, and then they converted the whole house to a clinic. And so I lived in that environment, watching people build brick by brick. So I learned how to marry and how to love an ambitious woman. It's not easy, my brother.
But that is deep, though. The learning, the behavior to learn.
How to marry, because you have to understand that as a man, we're ambitious. We believe, don't worry, I'll do it for you. You want a new car, I'll buy it for you. You want a house, I'll build it for you. Or you want that new purse, I'll buy it for you. But sometimes we forget to remove ourselves from the equation and let her work and buy that thing herself. Doesn't mean you shouldn't buy for her anymore.
Yeah, it doesn't change the role.
Understand that there's value for them in that accomplishment when you marry an entrepreneur woman. So I learned how to. It's a tricky thing, because you watch them. You're there in their most vulnerable state. You're there in their most successful state, and all the space in between. And you have to deal with all of that emotion. The moments when, like my wife here, when she's trying to create products, she's in here in the kitchen, I'm in her lab, and adding this one, subtracting that one. I'm the guinea pig, right? She'll come and be like, all right, come sit. Let me let me take this product on you. And you have to be supportive.
Yeah.
And you have to be, and here's that word again, intentional, right? You have to be intentional about the way you support her in this endeavor, right? Not passive. You don't wait for her to just come and say, oh, baby, this is what it is. You have to make sure that you come and tell her, hey, that product, all right, come on, let me see what it is. All right, try this one, So that's my own 2 cents on like how you marry an entrepreneur woman. Chris, your wife is busy. So I can imagine that your own equation is.
Getting married to an entrepreneur wife, right? Namo, that's it, correct?
Yep.
It's pretty much kind of. I'm an Igbo man first and foremost, and my parents were just business people, right? They own businesses, own supermarkets, own shops. I grew up in that traditional business, home, So my dad obviously used to be the one running the business. Then my mom manages it, right? He's the one that is, the brain. Then my mom is managing the resources. But as he got older, he's not as strong, health wise. So my mom takes over the bigger part of running the business. So he switches
Yeah.
up to a different line. He switches up to real estate, and then which is easier for him to kind of, I would say,
Manage and play a role
coordinate
and coordinate.
instead
Yeah.
of the shop and goods and all that.
Yeah.
So he switches that up, but they're still working in sync. So that for me was a huge base of how I look at women in general, right? And I also have 5 sisters, right? Meaning what? It gave me, I think, having 5 sisters, and my immediate younger one is a girl, so it's not like they are 10 years below me, right? We are just a year apart, all of us. So having
Which
five
is his own
sisters,
story. 10 kids, one
yeah.
mom, I
So
That was
think
the
I think
full
at this point
episode
we should
right
be
there.
inviting you to a different conversation. You're a perfect candidate for therapy. Let's
no,
even unpack what that experience is like.
no. So in that whole niche, right? It
Yeah.
was like seeing your sisters and definitely seeing in them the best woman, right?
Mm.
The most successful ladies, the ambitious, they do great in class, so it's like, oh, this becomes my expectation of every girl.
I see.
So it's so key to me that I've actually had some, I would say, maybe disappointment in some ladies that I kind of reference my sisters, right? It's like, oh, look at what do you think? I mean, you think this and that and that. Look at what my sister is, right? That kind of thing. So then I meet
Which
each.
is to your detriment, but keep going. Well, well, well,
Uh,
well, well,
So I
well
mean,
allow
no,
you
I
to
mean
go.
those ones, those are just
Yeah,
like
that was no problem
yeah.
now.
So
So
small matter.
now I meet my wife, right?
yeah.
Who's doing YouTube, which at that point is a more lifestyle thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I asked her, then this is like probably the first time I visited her in her place before, in her apartment. Then I'm like, babe, this YouTube you're doing, what is the goal?
Mm.
I asked her this question like this is what, maybe 6 years ago or so. Or wow, it's been long, man. 8 years. Jeez.
This is when you guys were just even
Yeah, when we
yeah,
just like this 2014 when we just met. I'm like,
yeah.
what are you doing this for? What's the end goal? And she told me this. And once she gave, because I'm one person that I like to know why you're doing something. So it gives me an
Yeah.
understanding of, do I fall in? Don't I fall in? She's like, oh, she's doing this so she
Don't
can
don't
create.
reveal don't reveal her behind the
No, no,
scenes
no,
Exactly. Don't
no, no,
reveal
information,
no, no,
no,
because
no, 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 no.
because I don't want you to now
This is
That's
come
this
and
is
secret
something
sauce,
that no,
man.
this is something
let my
that she has
podcast
also.
not just be the
No, wait, Namo. This is something that she has discussed as well
Can't give her her secret
in her
sauce now,
videos.
man.
No, she has discussed this in her videos, right?
okay.
So it's nothing like strange that okay, if I have this platform, I can also create a business from it.
Mm.
This is what she told me back then. I'm like, all right, great, I'm behind you. So that made me falling easily. Like,
And that speaks to what you were talking about in the first part of our conversation, where you were talking about saying to yourself, I need to know you for you. I
yeah,
need to
for you,
understand you.
yeah.
You
It's
just
like,
be yourself so that
why
I
are you
know,
doing this?
yeah.
So that I know, do I come in? Do I not come in? I'm not here to change you.
So how
This
does that
is
now
you.
feel that both of you know each other, like you talked about in the first part? Your
Yeah,
paths have intertwined, crossed from Makosa dancing to
man.
to your love of
It's
growing
crossed a lot.
beards. It's
Yeah,
crossed in different forms. What does it feel like being married to sisters?
man. I'm going to tell you. I think me and Chris's relationship is quite interesting, right?
Yeah,
Um, because I mean the evolution of a friendship, right? When you go from just a friends who, I think the first time I ever met Chris, we were going to go to a nightclub together or something
We're
like
actually
that.
going to a nightclub with
We're going to a nightclub together,
wow.
Niger
You were trying to
and
hide it.
in
Chris
BAM
said yes. It
t-shirts.
was night. It was nightclub.
so so the evolution of a friendship to brotherhood, right? And it's interesting because you know there was when Chris came to marry Ify, my mother-in-law asked me about Chris,
Mm,
right? And I didn't realize we hadn't known each other as long as I thought we had known each other. Because when we were
You're
now
now about to
talking,
answer professionally.
Yeah.
do you know how you are I remember scenarios in college with Chris. And Chris was not in college with me. Does that make sense?
Like it's like, oh,
That
Chris,
is what we
what's
call projection. That
you
is
But I'm just saying, he has been such a critical part of my life,
yeah.
that it feels like he has been there forever,
Mm,
you know? So marrying sisters, it made it very easy because now, I mean, if you look on our group chat, you have your group chat, we call ourselves the Adus because I'm on Uradu and they're in Madu. So we took the Adu. So we're like the
nice.
apostrophe Adus, you know what I mean?
yeah.
And the people keep asking us to come up with a show, keeping up with the Adus,
Yeah,
like
that would be
lots
like
of people.
amazing.
But it's so cool because like when we are together, it's just a beautiful thing. We're happy, we're
Mm.
connected, and a lot of times Chris will call me and say, "Yo, bro, if he did X, Y, and Z," I'm like, "You too," you know what I mean? You are going through the same thing,
I see
you
you. I
know.
see. Okay,
So
the
it's like
kindred
a
spirits
good
in the
support
experience.
system.
Yeah.
Support
Good
system.
support because a lot of times, anybody who knows me, I don't talk about internal issues within my marriage
Yeah.
at all. But having somebody like Chris, who we have similar conversations, similar experiences, it
Mm.
helps because now we can now discuss it. So, from that perspective, marrying sisters who are entrepreneurs, who are extremely hardworking, but also, I mean, if you see them humble as heck, I mean, it's a beautiful
Of
thing,
course.
and I think
Yeah.
I'm happy to have somebody to share that with.
And I tell you guys, I had the fortune of interviewing them on the podcast as well. Shout out to the sisters right there, Ify and Inky. I featured them on the last season, and it was such a great interview as well. But I think what you were discussing right now brings us to cultural commentary, right? We're back again trying to discuss deeply. But I need you guys to do something different. I get you on trying to
Mhm.
be very specific about yourselves, but we've talked about your own experiences and your own view of the world that is multifaceted. So I need you guys to extend yourselves a bit to the point about how do men really feel about successful women. And the
Okay.
reason why I'm asking that is that yes, there are stereotypical conversations out there. So feel free to address any concern
Mm.
that you feel, but I want you all to just step out a bit. So I'm going to ask you again, how do men really feel about successful women? Let's talk about men in your sphere of influence. What do you think the
Mm.
general stereotypical misrepresentation or misunderstanding um, uh, leaves? What is it, and what do you feel about it?
So,
Chris, I'll let you start this one off.
all right, let's see. So Namo, obviously, when you say how do men feel about hardworking, successful women, right?
Yeah.
And I know you said we should go broad,
Extend
like
yourself if you can.
yeah, yeah. But then again, right? I still feel like because there's one thing I've come to, in my own person after moving to the US, I've come to kind of build upon a lot.
Mhm.
Every day you try to build on some part of you that should be a better person, and it's trying not to be stereotypical.
That's good.
A lot. I've tried to redefine that whole word because you don't know when you are.
And that's why
And
we want to use this as an opportunity to break through the
yeah,
mold or to answer
Mhm.
questions, because you are married to successful women. You
Mhm.
dated successful women. You're a guy. So
Mhm.
what's your truth in that regard?
so now, which is why I said I would not love to be stereotypical, but because to be frank, you also have to look at the background, right, of the person. Because that background really molds us a lot. And like I think I've said, and I believe Lawrence has also kind of, put out there, we both have moms that
Mhm.
were hardworking and successful. So it's like expected of us. How, you get my point?
I get you.
Yeah. Now I would get it if you're trying to say that what is the expectation of successful women, right, from their men? You get my point. That's kind of different. It's like, what do men?
Why don't you give us that perspective?
Yeah,
then we'll take it.
Yeah. So in that regard, it could be different. It could be the same. It could be, very vast. But the expectation might just be that, oh, she's successful, she's doing great, she's ambitious, right? Now the man comes in and like, okay, maybe she's too ambitious, correct? Maybe she's too successful, maybe she's making so much money, all those things. There's no problem with that to start with. Now the problem comes in with you as the man first, right? What is your own stance on those things, correct? First, and then secondly, how does your wife, handle those situations? Am I making sense? So I'll give you an illustration. I'll use my wife as one.
Don't throw her under the bus. So if
No,
this
no,
one that
no,
you're
no,
about to come and give
no,
us
no, no, no.
illustration.
I'll use my wife as one,
Now,
right?
guy, it's you and your wife that will be at home if you throw that bus.
No, but
Continue.
if he is an entrepreneur, she's also a pharmacist, she does YouTube, all that good stuff, right? And I support her in every way, manner, or form. We share ideas.
We can feel it. You're gushing
Yeah.
over her.
So now the thing is, in all of that, right? The person that she is never changed. You get what I mean? The person that she is, a kind person. She's respectful. She wants us to work together. It has never changed. So now, for me, that is key to how I feel. Am I making sense?
I get you.
How do I feel about it? I feel great about it.
Because to you, in fact, what you're trying to explain is that even though the messaging in society is about defining women through their success, you're saying they're who they are. The success is just an output. And so you can't say that you're defining any woman based on that. So how do you feel? You feel the same way about her, the way you feel about her. It's not about her success.
Can I get in on this
I see you.
bit?
Come on, Lord. Tell me about this.
Yeah. No, I mean, this is a very critical conversation, actually, that I think affects a lot of guys trying to go into relationships, because whether we like it or not, women are more, if you look at the graph of
they're going
women
up
and success,
they're going up.
It's literally shooting up. And the what a lot of men, we talk about stereotypes here, but the concern a lot of men tend to have, success is two things: time and money, right?
Okay. Time
and money. They either have more money, they have no time, right? So a lot of men are worried that a woman might have too much more money. If you have more money than me, then you might not respect me in the house, right? That's some of the stereotypes people think. Or if you are too ambitious and you're working too much, then you won't have any time for me and the household.
Yeah.
Right. So that the two things, like, at least if I'm going to narrow it down, that a lot of people, some men tend to be concerned about when it comes to successful women and entrepreneurs, specifically entrepreneurs. I mean, I know we talk about the professional women, but entrepreneurs takes a whole different entrepreneurship.
It's a whole different,
different ballgame. And to be honest, if I'm going to be candid, that is a fair analysis and a fair concern, right? Here's the trick, is that is a concern doesn't necessarily mean it's a problem, right? Because a lot of times people are concerned that this thing may exist, However, I think if as a man going into a relationship with a successful woman, first of all, we got to sit down and you people have to talk about, what exactly it is that you are doing, and and how much time are you devoting to this thing that you are doing. And because this is very key, because ultimately some people walk in, they see the woman is successful, a woman who has a house of her own before you met her, has her own car, has her own 401k, can pay for her own meal before you met her, and then you're going to come into her life, and then you might want to start changing things around because you're not comfortable with her success. I think one thing that I try to do in, when I married my wife is I peeped. I say, okay, in what area can I remove some burden from this equation for
That
you?
is deep right there.
Make myself relevant to your journey,
Mm.
right? Because now if I take this burden out, I've removed that time factor, I've shortened that time factor. So now you have a little bit more time to spend with
Us.
me. Are you getting me?
Wow, that is you're analyzing the situation on how to actually add value and not
That's what I'm
you're not
saying.
critiquing the process.
You are
You're
not
adding
coming in
value.
there because the problem is that when you meet him, after all, most of us, when we are married, we're already in the late 20s, 30s, ways are already set,
Mm.
right? A woman who is ambitious in her 30s, you now want to come in and say, oh, you're going and you want her role to be cooking your house soup every night. you know,
Wow, this fatherhood, husbandhood, brotherhood roundtable is what we need. We're going to take this
are you
thing global. We
understanding
have to
me?
be discussing this thing on a more global stage. So let me ask this before we jump into the next segment, and this is going to be about men, right? So there's this concept of toxic masculinity,
Mm,
a phrase that some people have said, oh, it doesn't exist. It does exist. And then there's a relationship, in my opinion, between toxic masculinity and the stigma of mental health. And I always think of it in the sense of, men just don't want to see therapists, or
mm,
the idea that men tend to excuse other men's behavior or try to find. So I guess my question, I'm just seeking comments from you or views about what do you think about toxic masculinity, and what do you think about the issues of mental health stigma? I can go first.
mm,
I believe toxic masculinity exists. I'm trying to write
mhm,
up something about it recently.
mhm.
And secondly, I feel like the stigma of mental health is one of the things that continue to drag us down and influence toxic masculinity. So what say both of you?
Absolutely. Oh
And you're a
yeah,
doctor, I know, so
100%.
you're gonna even give me the medical thing inside this.
No, 100%. I strongly believe that toxic masculinity exists.
Mm,
I strongly believe that. And I strongly believe is in that toxic masculinity it, at its peak is blinding to the fact that even when there is help, so even when some of them a man who has this bravado about himself and I'm a man after all,
mm,
stay in your place woman, to the point where it's affecting their marriage, even when some of them go, they don't see the need for therapy, number one, but even to take it a step further, when they actually go see a therapist, that toxic masculinity sometimes is so bad
mm.
that therapy session is actually not productive. As a matter of fact, it may be detrimental because the whole idea of therapy is to come outside of
Therapist
yourself,
is
right, and
defeated.
Yeah.
see the other person's perspective. And sometimes, you say, "Oh, who do you think you are
Mm.
that you think you can tell people my business, or you think you can talk about me in such a way?" You
Wow.
know what I
Yeah.
mean?
That's deep.
And I
Yeah.
think that is horrible. I know people in marriages who are experiencing that,
Mm.
whereby you feel like you are in a prison. One thing I've told people is that I know we come from an era where when you're married, marriage is forever. I refuse to be in a prison marriage,
Mm. Good word.
right? And a lot of people, specifically women, are in marriages where they almost feel helpless. You know, I have to check myself a lot. That's why I love Chris's comment earlier about communication, right? If you are able to communicate your feelings,
Mm.
right? Toxic masculinity is almost the absence of communication of feelings. It's what it is what it is. My way is my way.
That is deep
Your
right there.
your feelings be damned.
Mm.
Communication, the presence of communication, in my opinion, is the beginning of the breakdown of that toxic masculinity. If you're able to communicate and say, "Hey, I feel this way about what you did," I tell my wife, we talk about perspective. You may think I did something a way, but I'm going to give you what I was thinking when I did that. And you might realize that my harming you or my upsetting you may not have been intentional. But a toxic man would be like,
no, I don't even see why I should explain anything.
why
Yeah.
am I explaining
Take it, but
myself to you?
yeah,
You know what I mean? Take it, it is what it is, and then storm out of the room. No communication, no nothing. So anyway, not to get too long-winded.
yeah.
That's
No,
my take on the
that's a good
topic,
word. That's a good word.
So
And I think
Chris,
anyone listening right now is going to be like, we need to take that and tell other men, because if you can communicate your feelings, you are actually breaking down those unconscious toxicity that you might even have that you're not even. To your point, is blinding. Chris, what say you?
yeah.
I mean, obviously, toxic masculinity exists. We've seen it around our homes a lot, especially coming from an African home. Like in our culture, it's like the man, the man, the man. And there's, in a lot of those homes, there is very little communication. So we've seen that happen. So it exists. Now, in relation to mental health, there is a huge correlation, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like Lauren said, you're at that point that you're blinded to anything that person is saying or trying to get across to you. And remember, as you're blinded, if I may use it literally, correct? As you're blinded, you start getting sick, correct? Because you're losing sight. And as you're getting sick and losing sight, it's not helping with your health. So it gets to that point that is the breaking point. But instead of you trying to seek for help, that same toxic nature of your nature as a man.
You don't want your guys to know that you're going to look for
Yeah.
help.
Or you don't even want your guys to know that you listen to your wife. Because there's a lot, right? With the communication thing, for me, why I say that is, like I said, we're not perfect. I always say that out there, we're growing. And my person is, how do I improve myself, my personal self, every day? Like, what am I doing before that I think I can be better at now? I'm one of those people that will always reach out to anybody and everybody. If I've talked to you today and I have your number, you'll be shocked. I'll be calling you every week. That's just me, right? So there's no way I wouldn't want to translate that to my home, correct?
Yeah.
And in that point of communication, a lot of times people also do not get that, how I put it, that like, what does communication really entail, right? It doesn't necessarily mean the person agrees with you. That is one part people always forget to get. It doesn't mean the person agrees with you, but it means the person understands you.
Yeah, they heard you.
Understanding is different from agreement. A lot of time people don't get it. But I told her, but she didn't accept my way. Yeah, but you told her, right? You told her, right? That's a plus. Communicate how you feel. Communicate.
Even they told her it's that we can doubt it because
no.
we don't know if even explain clearly,
Exactly. And a lot of times, like, there's something Lauren said I'm gonna, cap on. It's like, a lot of times I could have done something that hurt you, or you could have done something that hurt me. But when the perspectives are put on ground, I'll see that, oh, she didn't even do that to hurt me. And I won't lie to you. I'm saying this on my own marriage, correct? That is something that has been so helpful for us. Because, and I always try to make this a key point of our communication. Like, why did you do it? Just why? What was your reasoning behind it? Because it makes me, like, I'm like, oh, I get where you're coming from. And sometimes on my own, right? When I've been upset with my wife, I go back and think deeply by myself. I'm like, wait, I know she didn't do that to hurt me. Why am I so upset?
No, interestingly, I'm letting you talk about this because it's like, when and I'm just trying to take it back, guys. If you've not heard episode 2 of season 3, please go listen to the 7 things I was talking about when men say they want peace and what that whole storyline is about. But as you're just describing all of this, I see why we can break the cycle and how we can break the mold. Because it's really just taking accountability, right? It's looking at yourself and saying, you know what, I've not been put here as anybody's master or as anybody's driver of creation, like I have a role to play, and it's clarity and communication and how that is, you know what, guys? See, let me say it now, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Don't Forget to Flush podcast. But if you end up hearing that there's another podcast called the Roundtable, or the podcast is called the Fatherhood, the Fatherhood, Husbandhood of the traveling adus, don't be surprised if you see us on a podcast together, because we need to be able to answer all these questions. Don't forget to flush podcast, guys. Find us on social media, available on all platforms. If you are listening, it means you're listening to us somewhere. So just tell a friend that we're available everywhere. So guys, we're going to get into this segment. This is our fun segment. I know we missed it in the part one. And this part two, I really want us to get into it, because in this one, I call it the Dinkba and the Diva section. People love this section because in this section, Dinkba is from our part of the world, which means able man, strong man, Dinkba. But we're guys on this fatherhood, husbandhood, brotherhood roundtable. So it's all Dinkbas, it's all three Dinkbas on this one, no divas. And so how it works is you're going to give your response in your best effort of an accent. You have to pick any accent, and when you pick that accent, you have to stick with it. The only thing is that because I do this, I pick the Igbo accent, and so that's where I'm at. So it means you can't pick the Igbo accent. You have to find any other accent to make an effort.
Like
sorry, man.
Which range?
You have to try.
Because the truth is, our accents, like for me,
hold on, don't explain the accent. Chris.
Hold on, no explanation.
I'm about to ask you the question. Just pick one, whatever the accent.
No, but what accent? Anyone, right?
Any
other
one.
Give you the
provided
accent,
it's not Nigerian and it's not
Igbo. Wait,
they're good.
If it's Nigerian, it should be Nigerian.
It could be Nigerian if you feel like it, but I'm just saying it shouldn't be Igbo. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, but it can be any other. It can be
any accent in the world.
It can be Chinese. It can be
pick
Indian,
any accent.
It can be English.
Do your best possible impression.
Hi, oh boy.
So let's get into mode. My people. Hey, Law and Chris. Thank you for making it to this podcast. So here's the question that I have for you that you have to answer. What are the biggest lessons? And this one is good that you use numbers. You can say 1 or 2 or 3 lessons that you have learned. So what are the biggest lessons that you have learned so far as a father and as a husband that you can share with other men? So let's count it this way. You give 1 for fatherhood, you give 1 for husbandhood that other men can benefit from. This is the 3 Dinkba section. Let's go. Who wants to go first?
You now.
It's me. I have to answer. My podcast.
Igbo accent now. Use your accent and
answer. But
you have taken the accent from us now.
I've taken the accent.
This accent.
You have taken it from us.
Wow.
Look at this.
You have taken it from us. Answer.
Yes, I'm taking
just take it.
Hey, Namo, I'm a physician, not an accentologist.
You have to make look at me. I'm even act of character. You have to make an effort.
Namo. I'm an engineer, not an actress.
Look at this. Make an effort. Everybody who comes on the podcast makes an effort. Make an effort. Pick one. Pick a French one. Try your best impression of French. Let's go there. Hey, wait. You said you were born in Cameroon.
No, I'm not doing French accent. I'm thinking of what will I do now.
Okay, let's go. So who's going to give us a hand? Who's going to tell us? One lesson that you have learned as a father and one that you have learned as a husband that other men listening can and their wives too listening, or women can listen and go and tell other men to go.
This is too important a question to be using accent.
The question is too thick to be using accent. Because if I'm using accent,
answer now.
But let me ask. I don't do accents, man. I don't.
That's a Jamo accent.
I can't believe we just spent all this time.
That's a Jamo accent. You just give us.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
No, okay, no. Seriously though, so I'm going to be very concise, right? Mm-hmm. One thing I've learned as a husband is something that I was told, but I now understand it as a husband is a woman is an incubator. A woman is like a womb. Whatever you give to her, she will give you bigger. Right? If you give your wife love, she will give you bigger. If you give your wife happiness, she will give you bigger. If you give your wife toxic masculinity, she will give you bigger. If you give your wife sleepless nights, she will give you bigger. Right? If you give your wife joy, happiness, love, money, You like, so because they talk about the woman being the womb, and
Mm.
whatever you put in there, she creates, you know.
Bro.
So understand that a lot of times you shape as a man, you shape that relationship based on your inputs.
Mm.
So control the outputs by your inputs. That's number one.
That's deep.
As a father, the biggest thing I've learned, and I didn't learn this today, I learned this from my father. I talk to my dad every day, sometimes three, four times a day, is time is more valuable than money and gifts and toys
Mm.
for your kids as a father. Spend the time, be there, be there. My son told me today, Daddy, I want you to pick me up from school after I finish eating my lunch and playing with my toys. I know exactly when he's doing that. And I was there standing, and he was like, you remembered that time is valuable, more valuable than any kind of thing you can do for them, money, toys. So I spend as much time as I can with my kids. So those are my two things.
Wow. Those are
Um,
deep things. Okay. Okay. How about you, Chris?
Deep, deep, deep. All right. As a husband, right? Before getting into marriage, you have your definition of being a husband. It's like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do, this is what you're not supposed to do. But having had that experience now, I mean, I'm not that old in marriage. I would say that one big thing that I've learned being a husband is that gender roles, quote unquote gender roles, right,
Mhm.
should never be the basis of you setting your home.
Mm.
You should set up your home based on your strengths as couples because you're now one. That is one thing that I've learned, and I feel like it's working, for our family, right? Because when you tend to focus a lot on gender roles, you tend to miss out on who that person is, you know. So that's one big thing I've learned. So I know I already said this before, I think in the part one about the oneness, right? So that oneness thing is something that now that I'm married, I take it to a different level. I try to extrapolate on it in every way, manner, or form. Like my wife may not be here, you know, but what I'm doing is it like, an extension of her? Not, and then a lot of time people go like, oh, spouse, the complement. And I don't use that word complement each other, no. Because we are still gonna be like different people. But
Mm.
what I believe spouses should do is they should bring the best out of one another. And that is one thing that I try to stick onto as a husband, right? Bringing the best out of my wife because the reverse will be she will also bring the best out of me. So that is one big thing I've learned about being a husband. And then being a father, I mean, because growing up, like for me, growing up in a situation by my dad was always the one that was out there. So my mom tended to be the one that would like look after us more. But over time, as my dad grew older and had more time to communicate with us,
Yeah.
he's actually the more emotional person.
Mm.
He's actually the one that would reach out to you if you didn't hear from you in like 2 days. He's that person. But now that I'm seeing the young stage of fatherhood, right? My son is barely a year. It's gonna be 2 years, very soon. I've learned that time, correct, that you spend with your kids,
Yeah.
just trying to almost the same thing that Lawrence said. That time that you spend with your kids, it's something that can never be replaced.
Mm.
Everything else can be replaced. Everything else. I mean, everything else. But that time, and also as a dad, I would like to highlight that that time is not meant for just one person. Very key. Because a lot of dads, I mean, the stereotype is expected that the dad does not give a bath to the newborn baby, right? The dad does not change the baby. That's the stereotype out there most of the time. But I've come to be that dad that I'm involved in every aspect of my son's life, right? In every way, manner, or form. Like So much so that sometimes I'll tell my wife what my son is up to at this stage, right?
Yeah.
So, sometimes she'll be the one that will catch that first. But that is one thing I've learned about being a dad is that time can never be replaced. Everything else can be replaced, but if you miss out on that time, you never have it back.
Wow,
So
you guys just helped me successfully write my new book because I have to. I can might as well just take this and say I've started a book. Law said it's control your output by your input. He talked about time more important than toys and everything else, and then Chris is talking about setting up your house, which is profound. Setting up your house by your strengths and not by gender roles, and the whole idea of bringing out the best in your partner, and more importantly, the time being something that you can never get back. And so I'm like, yo, we're out here delivering nuggets, man. We're dropping truths left, right, center. This
Yes,
is the kind
sir.
of conversation that we're going to have to keep having. And so, as we get into this, we talk about toilet seat conversations on the show, and we always say, like, okay, here we're about to have some deep thoughts. But anybody who's listened to the first part of our conversation and now this second part knows that you guys have been dropping nuggets like left, right, and center. So we're going to flip it a bit on his head to get into toilet seat conversations this way, by asking you guys to look back now and think about what would you tell your younger self, because for the guys listening on the show, or for even ladies listening on the show, if you look back through your experiences, lived in Africa, moved over here, went to HBCU, you've hustled, washed plates to avoid babes. You've danced makosa and gotten paid for it. You're a medical professional. You're an entrepreneur. You're married to an entrepreneur. You're a fellow doctor. Like, we're talking about time and life commitments. Chris is doing his own thing, supporting his wife through YouTube, telling her to be like, if you think about all of that, folks, toilet seat conversation. If you could go back and talk to your younger self, who is just beginning life, one, what would you tell your younger self not to worry about? So that any young person who's listening will hear from two grown men, fathers and husbands.
Oh man, I mean that's a deep question. That's a very deep
Toilet seat
question.
conversation. That's where
It's a
the
very
action
deep.
happens. That's where all the thinking happens.
Yeah, because you're thinking, and especially when you're dropping real nuggets. Yeah.
right.
So what would you tell
Actually
your younger
dropping
self, man, not to
real
What a
worry
very
nuggets
good
about?
there.
question. What would I tell my younger self not to worry about? I guess. I mean, I guess if I'm going, because I have the clarity of now.
Mhm.
Which I guess is the premise of your question. I would probably tell my younger self to relax. Like, don't overanalyze picking the woman you're going to marry,
Mm.
right? Because the way I found my wife
Which we haven't heard. Could you
didn't,
just give us the high level cliff
you
notes?
know,
Come on, man. Give us the cliff notes real quick.
Man, I think
no, real
another
quick
session.
notes. Shout out to my boy, even though, my boy Iluka. He's a very good friend who I grew up with back home. I went to see him back in 2005
Mm.
in Ohio. And when I went to see him, in Akron, Ohio, he took me to my wife's father's home because my boy Iluka and my wife's mom are cousins.
Okay.
His mom and my wife's mom are cousins. And that's when I met my wife's family, but my wife was too young at the time, obviously. So, um, but
You were still
when
trying
she
to get
turned
away from Makosa dancing, but keep going.
when she when she turned 18, she posted this picture on Facebook, and my boy then was like, "Yo, check my cousin out." It was just kind of like a random. They were at an event, and I saw the picture. I still have this picture on my phone till today. She was in one purple
Wow, here we go with the
traditional attire
graphic
with gele and
descriptions. Yeah,
everything.
keep
You
going.
know,
I'm listening. This is super
and
cliff notes.
literally, I literally fell in love,
Mm.
and I messaged her on Facebook, and it was literally one of those things where it was just effortless, kind of like a gradual build. And then I one day I decided I was going to interview at the hospital where she was in for my internship. I didn't tell her I wanted to come there. I got I made my list of where I wanted to go. And when I got my position there, I called and I was like, "Oh, I'm coming to Ohio." She was like, "To do what?" You know.
Wow. So hold on.
Like it
You've
was
known
literally
her
what
pretty much half, like you sort
I've
of
known
knew
of her,
you've seen
None
her
of
picture, you've known of her,
yes,
and you've just been
known of
like, I
her.
am working hard to be ready to
No, but that's the
present
point I'm making.
myself
The
as
point
a
I'm
living
actually making is
sacrifice. Huh?
no, that's not it. The point I'm making is when I was younger, I had this idea of how I want to find my wife and this, all of that.
Mm,
And this just literally just fell on my lap.
pretty much.
And when I saw her, I knew it was perfect. I told my wife I knew I wanted to marry her from the first time. Like that 18-year-old picture, I was like, this is my wife, right? And I used to perseverate over like the type of person I want to marry. I had this idea and this one and that
Yeah.
one. And if I'm going to tell myself, I'm going to be like, just chill. You know what I mean? Like the person for you, when, just because when you overanalyze, some people leave their potential wives because they overanalyze it.
Mm, that's the
Don't
word right there.
just, they don't just let it happen. You know what I mean? And I'm grateful to God that I just let this one happen because otherwise, if I had analyzed that
Yeah,
this
and be
one
like,
and that one,
man,
and
you
now
know,
the adults wouldn't exist. Can you imagine?
you know what I mean.
and now
So
you've
if I
even
had
linked
known,
up your friend, they married the
you know what I
sister.
mean.
Wow.
And this was from me
Shout out
not
to Eloka, who's
being,
like Abraham or something, because this dude is like
So and
planting.
if you know me now, I overanalyze a lot of things. So me not just letting this just flow was I don't know how that happens. When it's supposed to be for you, be for you, right? So
Mm,
my knowledge of myself now and the wife I chose and the wife God chose for me, I understand now that sometimes you have to take yourself out of the equation and let it just be.
mm. That's
So
good.
that's what I'll tell
Good word.
myself is just kind of take yourself out of some of these equations because some of the things I may have missed out on is because I put myself too much into it and overanalyze it out of my life.
Good
So
word. Good word. Chris, how about you? What would you tell your younger self not to worry about?
with
Because a lot of our
respect
young,
with respect to relationships, right?
no respect to anything,
just
pretty
life.
Anything,
much,
just life. I mean,
Yeah.
in life in general, correct? I'll tell my younger self, I think two things. You know, number one would be just open up, like
Mm,
open up. Just. I mean, I'm not a difficult book to read. I'm pretty straightforward, but I was the kind of person that my emotions were always kept within.
that's
For
that's the that's the toxic
Hmm.
thing that corrupts
for
right
the
there.
for the earlier part of my life, I was on the period that the emotions were kept in, and they're not kept in because I didn't feel them or the person didn't know that I felt them. They were more kept in because, and also not because, how do I put it? Because, well, how am I trying? It's not because that I didn't want to give it, right?
Mm,
It
okay.
was just because that I was analyzing situations that I didn't have to analyze, right? I was
Mm,
the kind of person that I thought about dating. When I'm talking about emotion, I'm talking with reference to dating, right? I thought that dating was like rocket science. Like literally, I thought that
That
dating was rocket science. That if you dated
had a
somebody,
spreadsheet for dating,
yeah, if you did
yeah,
not have
calculus
like the whole
equations.
yeah, no,
strategy
Namo. I
and
think that for me, that's one big thing that when I was younger, I focused on a lot. It's like if I dated somebody, I had to marry them.
mm,
And guess what? This is the mindset I had. I'm not thinking about this like maybe when I was like 25. I had this mindset when I was like maybe like 18, 19. So you can imagine. So those years of my growth, those 18, 19, 20, 21, I was critically analyzing anybody I came around that I
mhm.
liked. And I mean deeply liked, right? So that is one thing I'll tell myself. I got out of that character with time, but I feel like, and I got out of it, I guess pretty, at an age that it didn't prevent me from meeting my wife, right?
Yeah, it
But
worked out.
yeah, it worked out. But that's one thing that I feel like as a person, it was as a younger person, it was one thing that I had to like always kind of go back to. Is like, okay, this person, I like them in every way, manner, or form, right? So what's holding me back? I'm like, but and the worst part of that was you always put it in your head why that person cannot fit in.
The spirit of Ify was holding you back. Oh.
I'm serious. It's probably what it was.
Woo, somebody's prayers was happening.
Yes,
That's what
it
we'll say.
was.
Somebody's
Ify
prayers
was a
was.
mountain of fire. Why
If it
you are
was,
analyzing?
if it was kabashing overnight, and I was just there doing like, oh man,
Wow, what a way to simplify. But I get what you're saying.
yeah.
The opening
So
up, which is, to what Law was talking about here about, don't overanalyze
yeah,
and there's a
I
lot of
used
young
to,
people that, we're not just talking about relationships, we're just talking about life in
No,
general, right?
life in
yeah,
general.
You
You overanalyze yourself out of
out of
out
things
of
that,
sometimes your blessings.
yep.
yeah, yeah. So let me ask
Yeah.
you guys this second part then, since you guys opened this Pandora's box, and I know we're coming towards the end of the episode, but same toilet seat conversation, like really think deep about this, because we're talking about what you're telling your younger self to not worry about. What would you tell your younger self to avoid?
Hmm. Ooh.
Because folks be like, I don't care. One of my pet peeves is when
This,
people say things like, I don't care. And I know it's a cliche saying, but it's just that in my
yeah,
mind, I'm
yeah,
like, why would you not care? Like, why wouldn't you care
yeah,
about what you're doing? If you're going to put time into it, why not care? But generally,
yeah.
let's talk about it. What would you tell your
What would you
younger
tell
self to
you?
avoid?
Hmm.
I mean,
I
Chris,
can,
you want me to start this one off? Or
I can go.
you want me to start this one off? Or
I can go.
okay.
So one big thing I would tell my younger self not to avoid.
Or to
Not
avoid.
to avoid it. To avoid.
To avoid.
The other one I think is easier.
Yeah,
Okay, to avoid.
Yeah,
Okay,
to avoid. What would
yeah.
you tell your younger self to avoid?
is to avoid doubt
Mm,
in yourself. That's what I tell my younger self.
Let's go for
avoid
it.
doubt.
Yeah,
That's good one.
that
That should
self
be a sticker.
doubt,
That should be a bumper sticker.
that self
Avoid
doubt,
doubt.
yeah,
would come in many different ways, right? Even in
yeah,
things that deeply you can excel in. The doubt just
yeah.
creeps in and it holds you back, right? So I'll tell my younger self, eliminate doubt from your dictionary.
Mm,
Like scratch it off. The word does not exist. Because and I can use myself as a couple of scenarios, right? Or one, like an illustration is like you're trying to get to this place, correct? You're trying to achieve this thing. Then you look at it and you're like, oh, but I can't do this, right? Not that you've tried and failed, right? Not that you don't have what
mm,
it takes to do it, but just because you've never done it, or because it's too big a thing, you tell yourself that,
Yeah.
you know what, that's not
and
for me.
and your youth is when you're supposed to make mistakes
Yeah,
and take risks.
and take risks. And you tell yourself that that's not for me. And there is one saying that my dad used to tell me like forever. Whenever I had those situations, and then he comes. Obviously, our dads our parents were a huge part of our lives.
Yeah.
So it's like, why are you not doing this? Why are you not doing that? You're like trying to bring up a flimsy reason, and then my dad always goes like this: did somebody do it? Like, I guess people are probably doing it. It's like, do they have two heads?
Mm.
I'm like,
Yeah.
and then that was the end of the conversation. Like
Why
literally,
can't you
like
why can't you put yourself
Yeah,
in
yeah.
why
that test?
can't you
Yeah.
do it?
So I'll tell my
That's
younger self,
interesting.
To avoid
eliminate
self-doubt.
doubt. Yeah, eliminate
Yeah.
self-doubt.
How
That's
about you, Law? What's that
Man,
like?
I'm going to be very specific with this one, man, because I've had this conversation with a group of my guys. We have this group where we talk about just now that we're successful and now we're doing this. A group of like, and this is going to be very specific. Not this is going to be avoid when you're young. You want to go have fun and pop bottles,
Mm.
right? When we avoid that, because I keep thinking to myself
Avoid
now that money
wasteful spending, or avoid hanging
wasteful
out, or
spending. No, that's when you go into a club and you've not really accomplished anything to go and be popping bottles, and then you go and be spending that money to pop bottles. I say this very specifically because of this. We talk about if you had put that $200 you contributed to that $1,000 table that you are popping every weekend or every other weekend in one stock that then.
Mm.
You see, a lot of times we are not educated financially, right? We're educated socially. So we're trying to keep up with these people but then we don't have this financial education then. So if I have to tell myself something to not do, because I kind of beat myself up a lot, because I'm like, if I know now what I know then,
Yeah.
I know then what I know now, I would stop myself from making those financial decisions, because I feel like people look at those small $100 here, $200 here. If you had put it in the right place and let it go for that 10, 20 years, that's time. We start thinking about investments in your 30s and your
Yeah.
40s. But if you had put some of that
The
bottle
20s.
popping money in your 20s,
True.
I'm sure I say it's very specific because I actually have thought about this conversation before. And I think that's something very specific I would tell my younger self to not do, because you've not earned that bottle poppingness
Status
yet.
Stability.
to say
You
you're
know what I
popping.
mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, that is good word. That is good word. No, guys, don't forget to Flush Podcast is in your debt. We are thankful. We are,
Amen.
I feel like I can shed one tear like they do in the movies and be like, thank you so much for popping in and answering these deep questions, because some of these
Yeah.
questions are questions that I think will stump anybody else, but for you guys it's like rolling up the tongue because you've lived experiences and you're learning from it, and you're the kind of men that I feel that we all as men should actually have around us, folks that can hold us accountable,
Yeah.
hold themselves accountable, and actually think through things. And so we appreciate you. Don't forget, because Flush will be available. This episode is going to be available now, and we're going to keep sharing it. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to what
You say, Namo, I just want to say thank you. People don't know this, but when Namo kind of wedded, he was part of our weddings,
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's MC
um,
Namo. Yeah,
and he
that's
was
Yeah.
part of, as an MC, and Namo has been a very critical part of our journey. I mean, he's just been a friend turned family. I appreciate you, brother. Strong work with all these good things that are happening around you, and it's not happening by mistake. This is the fruit of your labor. So thank you so much for this opportunity. We are your family. Anytime,
we
we'll be
appreciate you,
happy to
man.
help out.
We
Cheers, man.
appreciate you, man.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Namo, for having us on, man.
No, hey, you
It's
guys came in and
definitely
delivered on what we wanted to have.
I mean, it's gonna be monumental when we start saying that my first podcast was your podcast.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, man.
This is what we call catch
Yeah.
them young. Have you? We
These
got you at the beginning.
are the
So,
first,
as we're rounding off, the big question is: should men be going on boys' trip or not going on boys' trip? What say you? Yes or no?
Stay tuned for the next episode for the answer to that question, man. Appreciate everyone who listened to this podcast. Thank you. Don't forget
Stay
to
tuned for part 3. We got that covered.
Wow, men's trip is what
We
is.
got that covered.
Oh my god! And he's like, "We out."
We got that covered. No, we got that covered though, Namo. Part 3.
Guys, we out, man. Bye.